Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, where today I am going to be talking about the 1976 British war film The Eagle Has Landed, which is based on the Jack Higgins novel of the same name. And our story begins in late 1943, where a meeting is held between Adolf Hitler, Heinrich Himmler, and William Canaris. Hitler, of course, is Führer of the Nazi regime. Himmler is the government minister responsible for the German police, including the brutal Gestapo, and Canaris is the head of the military intelligence service, the Abwehr. Now, German special forces have just executed an extremely high-profile and successful commando raid to rescue Italian dictator Mussolini from Allied custody, and Hitler has been inspired to order another even more daring mission, one that he believes could change the course of the war. Hitler's idea is to send commandos into England, where they will kidnap Winston Churchill and bring the British Prime Minister back to Berlin for face-to-face negotiations to end the war. Hitler instructs Admiral Canaris to have the Abwehr prepare a plan for the mission. Now, Canaris believes the whole concept to be a ludicrous pipe dream, but he also knows that if he doesn't pursue the matter, Himmler will tell Hitler that his orders were ignored. And ignoring Hitler's orders would be an extremely bad move, not just for Canaris' career, but for his life expectancy. So he orders his adjutant, Colonel Radl, to prepare an assessment, making it clear as he does so that he thinks the whole thing is a waste of time. Radl, however, discovers information that makes him think otherwise. Winston Churchill will shortly be spending a few days near an isolated part of the British coastline. A skilled commando team might actually be able to get ashore, capture Churchill, and escape back to the continent before Allied forces can stop them. What happens when they try to execute that mission, of course, is the subject of the rest of the film. So when Jack Higgins wrote The Eagle Has Landed, he doubted there would ever be a movie adaptation, as the main characters were German soldiers. But in fact, the rights sold almost immediately, and the film made it to theatres only a year after the book was in stores. It wasn't an entirely smooth journey to the screen, however. Both screenwriter Tom Mankiewicz and leading man Michael Caine have claimed that director John Sturridge only took the job for the money, and that he walked out on the entire post-production process of the movie. Mankiewicz went so far as to say that editor Anne V. Coates saved the movie and made it watchable. Now, Coates was a 5-time Oscar nominee, including once for Lawrence of Arabia, so she certainly knew her work, and the film proved a success with both critics and audiences. The consensus was that it was a good old-fashioned adventure yarn. And with a couple of caveats, I tend to agree. So, let's recapture that World War II spirit and dig for victory, or at least dig for the good and the bad of this picture. So, Michael Caine, Donald Sutherland, Robert Duvall, Jenny Agutter, Donald Pleasance, Anthony Quayle, Jean Marsh. This is a movie packed to the gills with talented, charismatic performers. And whatever their feelings about the director may have been, none of them sell the movie short with their efforts on screen. Caine plays German officer Kurt Steiner with a credible balance of old-fashioned honour, but also a capability for swift and implacable violence. While Sutherland is affably charming as IRA agent Liam Devlin, a role Caine had turned down because he would rather be a Wehrmacht officer than a member of the IRA. And everybody else does good work too. But out of the whole cast, I think it is Donald Pleasance who is the most compelling and memorable. His role as Heinrich Himmler is only a small one within the scope of the movie, but he is wonderfully cold and reptilian and malevolent in the part. I think it helps that the script sets Himmler up as a manipulator and rival to a trio of more decent, principled German men. Steiner, Canaris and Radl are all physically more capable than Himmler and better soldiers too, but none of them have his ruthless aptitude for the malicious political manoeuvring that leads to success in the Third Reich. It's a well-written role, and it's superbly performed by Donald Pleasance. So in a post-Inglourious Basterds world, I guess we can no longer take it for granted that a film will bother to acknowledge well-known historical facts about World War II. You can kill Hitler, as that film did, or kidnap Churchill, as is planned here. But back in the 1970s, World War II movies were expected to stay more within the lines of what actually happened. Let's not forget that this is only 30 years after the war ended. Most of the men and women who served in that war were still alive, and there were something like 30 million veterans in the Western Allies alone. So The Eagle Has Landed, in both book and film form, has to do with the challenge of creating a gripping story where the ending cannot even pretend to be in doubt. Churchill will not be kidnapped. It never happened in the real world. In fact, there's no real evidence anything like this was even attempted, so he can't be kidnapped here. Steiner and Devlin must fail. Any tension in the film must come from another source than the outcome of the mission itself. Now, Jack Higgins was a gifted writer of characters, and that was his tool for the job. He made Steiner and Devlin multifaceted characters with likeable qualities. Steiner, for instance, is not a committed Nazi. Instead, he is a professional soldier appointed to command a penal unit after he protected a Jewish woman from the SS. Devlin is more layered, but Higgins shows him to have self-doubt, gives him some noble impulses, and provides an effective romantic subplot. These are techniques that allow the audience to like the men, even while not wanting them to succeed and knowing that they can't. The film mentions many of the same details about these characters, but its development of them is a bit perfunctory. Devlin's romantic subplot in particular is quite undercooked and exists mainly to justify a specific plot point. Instead, the movie relies on the charisma of the two men playing these roles to make us like the characters. Found that a little bit unsatisfying, felt a bit lazy. Something else I found quite unsatisfying was the ending, but to talk about that requires me to get much more specific about what happens, so if you prefer not to be spoiled, you could jump to the final 10 seconds of the video to see what I'm talking about next week. Alternatively, you can stick around while I discuss what I think is the biggest flaw in the movie. Because as I noted, both the book and the film are painted into a historical corner regarding the ultimate outcome. Churchill cannot be kidnapped and taken to Berlin. So Jack Higgins decided to double down and make the whole thing a shaggy dog story. Not only could the mission not succeed, the real Churchill was never there at all. Steiner and his men are attempting to kidnap a body double, who is diverting attention from the real Churchill while the British Prime Minister travels to Tehran for a conference with Roosevelt and Stalin. In the book, Higgins has Steiner reach the fake Churchill, while still unaware it's not the real man, and Steiner has the opportunity to shoot the target, which wasn't the goal of the mission but is probably the most he can hope to achieve at this point. In the book, Steiner hesitates to gun down an unarmed man and is shot by the fake Churchill's very real guards. In the process, Higgins creates a bleak irony to the whole affair. Steiner is a decent man in the service of monsters who accepts a mission that was pointless from the beginning. Everything he and his men do, every life they take, every one of them dies, is pointless. It's all wasted effort. And it is in part pointless because Steiner is a decent man who hesitates to cold-bloodedly assassinate his target at the final moment. The movie, meanwhile, has Steiner take the shot, presumably for the shock effect of having Churchill apparently be killed. But of course it then has to drop exposition after the fact about the whole body double business. And to me, the result isn't the bleak irony of the book's approach, but instead a sense of a cheap rug pull. You know, we've gone for this big shock, but it's immediately negated, which is a shame because it left me with a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. What is otherwise a solid traditional adventure story with a strong cast and well-staged action sequences. Next time, after the box office failure of Terror of Mechagodzilla, Toho made multiple plans to relaunch the Godzilla franchise across the late 70s and early 80s, but it would not be until 1984 and the 30th anniversary of the original movie that Big G finally returned to screens in a near-total reboot of the franchise. Spoilers, it wasn't really worth the wait. But that is next time. Until then, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you've seen The Eagle Has Landed, let me know what you thought of it.